Hi guys, in this video, before I start talking about the actual devlog, I want to get some feedback onto something that I'm doing differently to the video itself. So one thing that I've noticed is that I do have a tendency to just waffle on for ages, and the problem with that is that if I'm just recording my screen and all I've got on there is just a static code editor, you're literally just looking at a frame of my code editor. So in the previous videos, I had some clips running of some Pong games which I'd been playing, which I'd found on Itch. But I've run out of those, and so I thought I wanted to have something a little bit more dynamic. So what I've done this video is where I've been doing some coding, I've literally just opened up the recording software and just been recording what I've been coding basically, and then I've just put that into the video but just sped it up massively. So I'll have that running in the background of me just chatting. So let me know what you think about that. If you find it like distracting, let me know. If it's more interesting than just a static screen, let me know. If it's like too fast or too slow. Again, I'm just looking for some feedback on that because I don't really know how to structure it. Okay, so now I'll get on with the actual devlog. So in the last devlog, it had all gone horribly wrong, and so I said I was going to take a break, and I did. I stepped away from the game a few days. I went over to that book that I've been reading, and I worked through like most of the first game which they had implemented. Unfortunately, it didn't really help because in that particular game which they were building, there was a lot of things in the code structure that I didn't like. So, for example, they basically exposed all of the objects of the game world in this kind of like global way so that everything could just interact with everything else. And that's not the kind of system I want to develop. But I have a feeling to give credit to the book, I have a feeling this is something they actually address as they go on further into the book. So that was fine. But anyway, what I decided to do was just start from scratch. I took a break for a few days and then I literally fired up a new code editor, started a new project, literally Pong 2, and I just started to rebuild the code from the start. I just got into such a mess with the first game, and I couldn't fix the bugs because I didn't understand my own code. So I felt like I just needed to start over, which is exactly what I did. So let me show you what I've done. So I have completely reworked the game logic. I think if my main problem is kind of hard to explain without showing you the code. Actually, let me go to the code and I'll kind of talk you through it as I'm going it. So I've structured the actual files a little bit differently. So you'll see that this says game scenes and not states. I'll mention that in a minute. So I've got those in there, and then I've got game objects in here. So there's just not as much clutter in the main folder structure there. So the main game itself is very simple. It just loads two scenes. Actually, let me just talk about the scenes versus states. So this is something that I was getting not exactly confused about, but when I realized that I needed to rework the logic, I realized that the way that I was talking about game state, like if you're on the title screen, that's a state in itself, and then if you're playing the game where you're seeing the main board, that's a different state, right? But it wasn't quite as simple as that. They're more like different scenes of the game, and I realized that other engines like Godot use a scene based system, and it made it easier for me to think in terms of scenes. And what I realized was that I needed to handle state a bit differently. So I've now got the concept of a scene and state. So I'll show you that as I go through the code. So basically there's just two scenes. There's a title scene and a play scene. So I load those at the beginning, and then when I do the update and draw, it's literally passing that over to what's now called the scene manager rather than the state manager. So it just draws the current, so it just updates the current scene and draws the current scene. So that's the same kind of thing as before. So the title scene is, I will show you the game in a minute. The title scene is similar to before. There's no longer the power balls. So what I've done is I decided, if I come back to here, I decided one of the mistakes that I made the first time around was that I never finished the game. I just kept trying to add new stuff. I was like, oh, it'd be cool to have the AI get stronger. It'd be cool to have these power-ups, right? Those power balls that I tried to do. But never did I actually get to a point where I had a finished working game. And then I ended up with just a complete broken mess. And so I thought that was a mistake. I think this is kind of a common thing, particularly for someone who's got ADHD. It's like, ooh, new shiny. Oh, let's add this thing. Let's add that thing. Much more exciting than putting in something like a wind condition. So I decided this time what I wanted to do is create the simplest possible version of the game, which is complete, which you can actually play from start to finish, win or lose the game, and nothing fancy. So that was the approach that I've started here. I just wanted a game that was finished, and that was it. So so in the title screen, there's no Powerball. So unfortunately, what I've got at the moment doesn't have those Powerballs. I do want to add them in, but I wanted to get a working, finished version of the game first. So the rest here, obviously, there's not much in the way of input or update. It's just drawing the text on the screen. So the main meat of the code happens in the play scene, which is similar to the play state that I had in the first version. But this time, I've now got actual game state handled within the scene. And this is what was different to before. And also various objects in the game now manage their own state. So as before, it loads the load content loads in the various textures. So I've got the same sound effects and things that I have. I've still got the power up sound effect, even though I'm not using it yet. So everything else there is pretty much the same. But what you'll see now, what's different is that I'm changing how I'm handling my input and how I'm doing my update based on what state we're in. And I think this is much cleaner. So for example, I'm only looking for the movement key. So I've got the W and S to move the paddle up and down. I'm only listening for those while the ball is actually in play. So if you're at the start, another thing that I've implemented also is, do you know what? It might be easier if I show you. So if I just play it. So we don't have any of the, I'm going to turn down my own. That doesn't turn it down. All right. So when you press space now, it comes into the game, but it doesn't immediately fire. I wanted a delay. So this time you have to actually press space before it will start to play. I still suck at the game. That still hasn't changed and probably never will do. But now, if I press P to pause, I now cannot move I can't move the keyboard. Unpress P to pause, I can carry on moving again. Now, at any point, I can press escape to go back to the main screen. So that is all done here. So to serve the ball, the only thing that's listened for is the space key. When we're in play, we can listen for the movement keys and the pause key. The win condition, we can actually win the game now. All that's going to do is that once we're in the space key, it starts a new game. If we're pausing, all we do is play the game. So this just makes it simpler to kind of follow through the logic. And then I've got exactly the same thing in updates. So if we're in a new game, we reset everything and then we set the game to serve. Now there isn't anything in here in the update because serve doesn't actually do anything. When we're in the serve state, all we're doing here is listening for a key press. So once we get space, we then go into the new ball state, and then that here does things to the various game objects. So the new ball and new game obviously are slightly different. So every time there's a new ball, the AI is going to get a little bit stronger. That's the idea there. And then once we are in the new ball, we immediately then switch to the in play state, and then this is where the main work happens. Now this part here, this is the part where I was getting it wrong. So if I now show you how I've done. See, the draw is the same as before, it just draws the various objects. But let me show you how I've done a few things. The collisions I've done a little bit different. I've tried to make the collision a little bit more robust. Hasn't quite worked. But where are we? So where is it that I'm trying to do? It's the ball collision right here. So when we handle a collision, what I was doing before is if the ball has bounced off a paddle, what I was doing before was trying to code it as if I was coding a web app, like saying to the ball, you need to bounce now. Or when I was handling a movement, I was saying to the paddle, you need to move now. But of course, it doesn't work like that. You see, in a web app, if I want to do something like load a record from a file and display it on a screen, it's transactional. It completes that entire operation immediately. It will go to database, it will fetch that record, it will return it, it will send it back to the client, it will display it on the screen. It will do all of that, and then it sits there and waits for input. Games don't work that way. Games work on an update loop where you're literally rendering and updating one single frame at a time, and it's like this little slice of the game, and that is what I just couldn't get my head around. So what I've changed now is that all of the various objects manage their own state and do so with flags. So when I say to the ball, I want you to bounce, the ball just sets the flag that says, okay, we're bouncing now. So let me show you the objects. So the paddle is a base class. So this manages its own state. It's either moving up, it's moving down, or it's stopped. It starts off in the stopped state. It's got a few little helper properties there. And so then here, where we do the moving up, this is all now contained in the update function. This is the something that I really wanted to make absolutely clear. Game updates occur in the update function, and every game object follows the exact same pattern. It's got a load, an update, and a draw, and everything is in the right place. So now if we're moving up, it does the code to move the paddle up and down. So when we say new ball, it simply changes the state. When we say move up, so this is coming from the scene. So in the scene, in my input, where I'm saying move up and move down to the paddle, this is what was different in my previous code. Where am I? Sorry, wrong one. Player, no, base class. I was trying to directly change the position and the velocity of the paddle here, and instead now I'm saying no, the state's changed, and it's only when update is actually called on the paddle that it changes. And I've done exactly the same thing with the ball. So the player paddle doesn't really do anything apart from change its speed, but that's going to be useful later on when I want to add in those power balls. The AI paddle is the same as the base, except that now has the opportunity, the ability to track the ball. But it does the same thing here. If as it's tracking, it's not directly doing it, it's changing the state. And the actual work happens in the update. And then the ball class, same kind of thing. So the ball manages its own state. So it's either stopped, it's moving, it's bouncing off of a wall, so which is the top and the bottom, or it's bouncing off of the paddle. And now, so same kind of thing. All of the actual movement of that ball is done in the update. I don't have these other functions littered all over the place like I have before. And so this time, if it's bouncing off the paddle, that's when it does the work to actually do the calculations, to actually do that. And the same thing with the bounce. So, and here, so if I come back to my play scene, in my update here, I'm saying handle the ball collision, right? And so when it handles the ball to the paddle collision, it tells the ball bounce from the paddle. But what that does is it's taken into account a shift. That was something that I was trying to do to improve the collisions. So if it hit the ball, but the ball was kind of slightly inside the paddle, it kind of shifts it outside of the paddle before it bounces off. It's not quite working though, so it's something I still need to fix. But now it simply changes the state to the bounce, but it doesn't actually do anything until update is called. So I think, yeah, so that is kind of it. So let me show you the game working, and I need to change the volume really. Hold on 1 second. I don't know how to change. I know I've got it changed on my recorder. I don't know how to change the volume for me in my headset, but never mind. Actually, I can probably just turn this down if I can remember how to do it. So let's start the game. I've in the main game, you'd have to score 5 points to win. I could change that to 10. For the demo that I'm doing now, I'm setting it to 3. So the ball does speed up a little bit, and initially the AI starts off pretty slow, and I've also got what's called like a little tracking delay. You'll notice that the AI, it's not moving immediately. There's a delay. So I wanted to make the AI a little bit dumber to begin with, so that you've actually got a chance to beat it. So there we go. If I can get 1 more point, I'll actually win the game. And then I can show you the win condition, which is something that I just did not have, first of all. Need 1 more. 1 more. Come on. No. Yay! We win. And then similarly, if I just deliberately lose, which is not hard to do for me, you lose. And then we start a new game. So there we go. I have a working game. It's very, very basic, doesn't do a lot, but it works. And at least now I feel like if I want to add back in other functionality, such as the AI having a bigger paddle, or of course those power balls which do various different things, I feel like I've now got the structure to be able to do that. And also this structure with individual objects, where is it, kind of like managing their own state, things like this, and having everything in update. I feel like this structure is something that I can apply to any game going forward. Okay. Now, the last thing I think is, yes, so if I now go to, this is the itch page for the game, there is now download. So I have created a release version, so you can just literally download it. All you've got to do is strap the zip file, and it should just run from there. So that's the version where you've just got to score 5 points. Those were my previous devlogs. Obviously the last one where it had all gone horribly wrong, I've still got all of the assets on there that's needed. Could do with updating the screenshot slightly, but yeah, so it's now released. So now I've got a released version of the game, but there's still a lot more I can do to it. I still want to do the whole Powerball thing, but on the other hand, I also just want to take a break from it and just start a new project. I was having a look back through my commit history on GitHub, and I've been working on that game for over 3 weeks, which is too long for something that's so simple. Obviously I had problems with it, which is why it took so long. But it's kind of like now I'm not entirely sure how I want to kind of do things going forwards, because one thing that I'd said earlier on is I want to do lots of small projects, and I definitely still want to do that, but how much do I do in any individual game before moving on to the next one? So one of the challenges with learning game dev is like there's things which I don't really understand. So obviously when I tried to do the Powerball thing, I wasn't really understanding how to implement logic that had a delay to it, and all of this kind of thing. And I also wanted to do things like I was thinking about putting high scores in, and then I realized that provides poses its own challenges, and so forth. There's lots of little bits and pieces, and so I think what I want to do going forward is, so every new game I do, I'll start on a new game and then do what is the absolute bare minimum that I can do to get this particular game working. And when I say working, I mean something that's finished. One of the problems with Pong is that I just didn't finish it the first time around. I just kept trying to add new things. So I want to kind of get the core essence of any new game project have it kind of like in a finished state, and then decide at that point, okay, do I add new features? Do I go back to a previous game and add new features? Do I move on to a new project? So this is something that I think I'm going to figure out as I go along. So for now, I want to stop working on Pong. I have an idea for the next game project, which isn't going to be Flappy Bird actually. And then if I do come back to Pong, I'm going to do that later. All right, so that is it for this video. The next one is going to be the next Get Devlog for my next game. Thanks very much for watching. How do I turn this off?